So for my idea project, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act project, I chose conduct disorders. So conduct disorders, according to Johns Hopkins Medicine, is a type of behavior disorder. A child usually has antisocial behavior. They may disregard basic social standards and rules. They might be irresponsible, skip school, steal or do things that violate others, as well as others' property and different buildings, and they might cause physical pain and suffering on animals and other people. As far as causation goes, there are a couple different factors that tie in to the causation of these disorders. There are some environmental, so there might be family conflict if there's one. If they're in an environment where there's just always conflict and fighting, it might be harder for them to have good social skills and different abilities because they're not learning them at home. There's also peer rejection. If they feel isolated and like they have no one to go to, they might turn to violence just to hide the way that they're feeling. Association with a deviant peer group. Usually what your peers participate in, that is what you're more led to participate in. So if you have peers that are always doing bad things and getting into trouble, you're more likely to get in trouble as well. Impoverished living conditions, and also exposure to violence, because kids are known to kind of learn from what they're able to see. They learn through social interactions and events, so if they're always seeing violence, that might be something that they think is okay, and that's just the way that they'll act. There's also genetic factors. There's neurochemical abnormalities and autonomic irregularities. So, scientists believe that genes contribute to the development of conduct disorders in children. As stated in one journal, based on research, several items, use of weapons, lying, and stealing without confrontation, have heritability estimates that are significantly greater than 0, suggesting that these items are significantly heritable. So we can see that scientists believe that it is possible to inherit traits that would lead to conduct disorder. So then we have prenatal, perinatal, and postnatal, and the little chart we have down here shows that prenatal is before birth, perinatal is at the time of birth to 1 month, so the very beginning of life, and then postnatal is in the first 5 months of life. So some prenatal would be an association with maternal smoking during pregnancy, and this would also relate to an exposure to toxins of young children. So some of the perinatal ones are birth complications. There are many different things that could go wrong during birth, and so that would be one thing that would cause it. And then for postnatal, early exposure to poor quality child care, inadequate parental supervision, and just if the parents are neglecting their children and they're not involved at all at their lives in the very first few months, when building just attractions with their parents and having somebody to depend on and trust is really important. So research shows that youngsters with conduct disorders are likely to have ongoing problems if they and their families do not receive early and comprehensive treatment. So we know that it's really important to kind of just figure that out early and try and get them treated as soon as possible. So some characteristics, there are some noticeable and hidden ones. So noticeable would be if they're vandalizing different areas, if they're stealing, shoplifting, delinquency, bullying, physical fights, using a weapon, forcing someone into an activity that they didn't consent to, having intimidating behaviors, and just being cruel to others. These are some characteristics you might notice in kids that have conduct disorders. Some of the hidden ones are that they might have trouble feeling and expressing empathy or remorse. So you might see that they really are kind of like emotionless, and you might wonder what it is that's causing that. But one of the reasons might be that they don't even have the ability to feel and express their emotions, so it just builds up all inside them and they just react because they don't have any other way to deal with it. Could be trouble reading social cues if they are just not understanding the way that you behave in a socially acceptable way, that is, other people are comfortable to be around you with. Also school problems. They might have bad grades, but that might not reflect actually what's going on. Some teachers might just assume that it's because they don't try in school or they don't want to be there, but it might be that they genuinely have trouble and that's something that's challenging for them. Also, substance use. This is something that some kids hide. Sometimes it's noticeable, but it could also be hidden if you have no idea that the student is taking that. And the little picture in the corner just shows that as far as people go, our characteristics, there are really so many about us, and they all make up such an important part of who we are. Statistics. So in the overall population, according to the American Family Physician, the estimated lifetime prevalence of conduct disorder in the United States is 9.5%, with a lifetime prevalence of 12% for males and 7.1% for females. So we can see that it is more common in males than females. And for the IDEA population, the students with conduct disorder are served under the category of emotional disturbance through IDEA. And according to the Institute of Education Services, approximately 1% of the school-age population has been identified as disabled under the criteria set forth in IDEA. And when you're looking at all students served in special education under IDEA, students with emotional disturbance comprise roughly 6% of the total population. So as far as continuum of placement and least restrictive environment go, the least restrictive environment usually means that the students should be separated from non-disabled classmates and from home, family, and community as little as possible. So you really want them to be included in the classroom whenever it is possible. So on the right here, we have a chart of the different continuum of placement options. So the left would be when they're the least separated from the people around them, from their peers and family, and that would be in a general education class. So they would be involved in everything that other students are involved in. And then as you go to the right, it becomes more restrictive, and they get more separated from the people around them. So the very highest one is a residential school, and they are sent away to live at a different school, and there they have their needs met. They might have some family visit home, but they really spend most of their time in a residential school. So because there's a push for inclusion for students with disabilities, most students ideally are served in the general education classroom because it gives them the highest and greatest opportunity for success, especially with building social skills as well as academic, but mainly social skills. And that classroom would have to be developmentally appropriate, use developmentally appropriate instruction, be organized and set, because these students really need strict schedules and just an organized environment to be successful. But ultimately it depends on the severity of a student's disability and also the safety of all the members in the room. So if a teacher feels that a student has a very severe disability and they are a danger to themselves or any other member in the class, they'll most likely be in a self-contained classroom. So these students will most likely be served by a couple of different teachers, a general education teacher, behavior specialist, a special education teacher, and there would still probably be someone on the team, but that would be the most common ones on the team. And the amount of interaction with each of these teachers would just depend on the placement. So if they're in a general education class only, they would mostly be with a general education teacher. There are some different strategies for learners with conduct disorders in an elementary education classroom. The first is a positive behavioral intervention and support. So it works by using a behavioral monitoring chart in the classrooms. There are different levels to the chart, and the goal is for the students to stay on green or a positive color. The chart that I have on the right has more than one positive color. There's green, which is a good day, and then as you go up higher, it means that the child did even better than expected, and if you go lower, it means that the child was misbehaving in some way. So how this works is that to start the day, they'll all be at the same place, probably on green, and then once they start behaving and interacting with the class, they move their clips to the different colors depending on their behavior. So if they're behaving well, it'll move up or it'll stay on green, or if they're misbehaving, it'll move down or go towards red. So it's effective because it's structured and allows the students to monitor their own behavior. They get to see where they're at and see, what they need to do better, or what if they did something wrong. And the students usually get rewards for good behavior, and therefore they're motivated to stay on green if they have a reason for wanting to stay on green. And most teachers found that it's more effective when the students are asked to move their clips on their own. This is actually something that I did in my own kindergarten classroom. And if you had to move your clip by yourself in front of the class, it was definitely more stressful than just the teacher moving it. Second is just consistent schedules, and also to reinforce rules and expectations. So the teacher should have daily schedules in the classroom that they go over with their students, and they also should enforce the rules. So they should constantly be reminded of the classroom rules, and the teachers will also be consistent in enforcing the rules. So and just the behaviors. So if a student is breaking the rules, the teacher should respond to that student as soon as the behavior happens. Or if a student is doing something wrong, the teacher should be responding right away, because this will teach them that misbehavior will not be accepted, and it'll also be that there are consequences, whether good or bad, for their actions. And it will also allow the students to feel prepared for what's to come next if you have a schedule, instead of trying to have to adjust last minute, because this is something that they are already not so great at. So then we have some modifications and accommodations. So for academic, the students with conduct disorders could be given large tests in sections, so it would be spread out over the course of a couple of days. That way they wouldn't have to focus as much attention to one task at a time. They should also be given frequent breaks during instruction time, just to collect themselves and kind of get a little break and a breather. As far as social emotional modifications go, the teacher could have the students pair up to work with partners on small tasks, so that way they still are working on their social interaction skills, and they get to share their ideas in a less stressful environment. For physical environment modifications, the teachers should have areas in the room where students could have small cubicles where they want to work independently if they are having trouble, or if they just want to, if the rest of the class is just too much, and the location should be separated from the rest of the class, and somewhere that's quiet, so they have their own little space to work. And there should also be an area of the school that has adaptive furniture, such as therapy balls, which a student would be allowed to use at certain times during the day to relieve their stress and to use up energy. I actually saw this in one of the things that we learned in this class. They had a stimulation room, and students with different disabilities could go to that room, and there was punching bags, and there was therapy balls that they could throw on the ground, and just things that they could touch, and ways that they could just get out some of their energy, and if they're frustrated, they could relieve it in a way that is not endangering any other students. So that would be something that, although not all school districts have it, that it would be a really great modification to the environment for these students. And that's all that I had for my project. I used a bunch of different sources to gather all my information. Here is some of the sources. This is more of the sources continued, and here are the final sources. And that's all I have for my project, and thanks for watching the video.